Hello, agus fáilte chuig Blúiríní Béaloidis, Padréile úr ó chuna sa Béaloidis éireann in seo in Coláiste Allscoile Wallachlia. Hello folks and welcome to episode 2 of Blúiríní Béaloidis, the new podcast from the National Folklore Collection here in UCD. I'm Claire Doohan.
I'm Jonny Dillon.
And we're part of the archive team here in the Folklore Collection. We hope you enjoyed our first introductory episode, which looked at some of the definitions of folklore and some common misconceptions surrounding the discipline. We also looked at the early history of folklore collection in Ireland and Europe and the main ideologies and people driving its growth and development. For those of you who missed it, this first episode is available on our SoundCloud platform and will be available shortly on iTunes too, as will this and all upcoming episodes, as suggested by one of our loyal listeners. We welcome all such feedback actually on the podcast series, so do keep getting in touch with all ideas and recommendations. It's actually really nice hearing feedback already, because it's very much what we want to aim for, isn't it? Kind of an interactive and participatory project. So we were joking about this yesterday, Jonny, but actually I feel a bit like, is it Fraser Crane? You know, Seattle, I'm listening, or we're listening. And we are, because we'd actually love to action any points that you recommend and that you'd like us to explore a bit further. So today, in this second episode, that we're still here, we haven't been fired or sent to the law courts for libel yet, we'll be looking at our first substantive topic, and a timely one too actually, that of May Day, and the traditions, beliefs, customs and lore which accompany this quarter-day boundary festival on May 1st each year. And it's a really vivid and colourful period in the Irish traditional calendar custom. So for the sake of completeness and to avoid confusion, because there is a lot of ground to cover with a topic like this, Jonny and I thought we'd be a bit strategic about it and look at the festival in two stages, I suppose. Firstly, the practical traditions, customs and responsibilities of the May Festival, and then we'll move to the more liminal and supernatural and maybe the magical aspects of the period. But before that, we thought, having discussed it, that it might be worth touching on and kind of familiarising ourselves with this idea of calendar custom that we speak about a lot in folklore, but for those coming to this podcast maybe the first time would like a bit more information on, just to see how we measure and mark the passing of time and what that might have meant for kind of previous generations. So Jonny, I'll get you to start on calendar custom and then we'll move through our schedule as we go.
It's a very interesting area or aspect of folk tradition. And in the last episode we were talking about some of the definitions of folk tradition and then some of the different groupings as well, even though they're not entirely satisfactory, but mentioning, say, the narrative tradition, singing, storytelling, that kind of what we'd call oral literature, and then material culture as part of folk tradition. And so which would be kind of crafts, foods or houses, all these kind of more physical expressions. And then in between that, what's called social folk custom, rites of passage, rituals and calendar observances. But calendar custom was said by Kevin Danaher, one of the kind of renowned folklorists who worked for the commission here, that it was the area of folk tradition that most broadly revealed the panorama of the whole. That in it you'd find all these aspects of oral literature, of singing, of narrative, of material culture, effigies, clothes, foods, as well as ritual customs, divination and magic, all would attach themselves to certain times of the year. So calendar custom, I suppose, is a particularly kind of broad area full of a huge array of different kind of traditions that would kind of go along with it. And May Day as well, as part of that, has a kind of blinding amount of material that's kind of connected to it. And all over Europe as well, you have these kind of celebrations largely to welcome in the summer.
Yeah.
So sometimes you say, even again, in one of the ways to explain this to people who mightn't have a sense of it, May Day is one of the quarter days. And the quarter days, quite, I suppose, simply enough, as they do, as they say, they divide the year into quarters.
Yeah.
So if you were to imagine the year as a wheel, which you then kind of split into 4 different quarters, there are festivals at those quarter points that represent in a way the essence of the season maybe that's being ushered in by them. So the other quarter days we'd have would be, for example, Lammas Lunasa, the 1st of August, Halloween, Samhain, the 1st of November, then we'd have Blúiríní, St. Bridget's Day, the 1st of February, and then Bealtaine, May Day, on the 1st of May. And so even at a very basic level, I suppose, the light half and dark half of the year we're thought to begin both at Samhain, at Halloween, when we have our death festival, and then at Maytime, at Béaloidis. So the year is kind of divided in half in that kind of fundamental way, really. So a lot of the customs that we'll look at and traditions that relate to May Day all pertain to the kind of the asserting of boundaries. It's a time of kind of paranoia in a certain sense in the community.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to leave the house. Having read all that we've read, I just think I'm going to stay in on Monday and not do anything.
Close the blinds, lock the doors, do not light your fire.
Don't answer the phone.
Don't answer the phone, don't do anything. You're doomed, basically.
Pretty much.
It's the same, in the same sense that the other world is seen to be very active at Halloween. The same thing is occurring in Béaloidis in May.
But more kind of malevolent in some ways in May Day, whereas at Halloween, I don't know whether you feel this, that there's a more accepting sense of this intrusion of the supernatural, whereas on May Day it's really threatening.
It is,
this sense, which we'll come to in due course.
It is quite threatening. I suppose at least in Halloween, when you kind of welcome the dead, you welcome your dead ancestors, you leave the west-facing windows of the house, etc., open. People would set a feast for the dead to return. At May Day, it's all about ensuring your good luck for the year ahead and trying to avoid damage, basically. But it's worth even in thinking of time. And how time is understood in a modern context as quite an empty or indifferent series of points, all endless, all kind of equal, but all different in the same way. Whereas in a traditional sense, time, the year is viewed as a kind of cycle from dark to light, from death to life, season to season, an endless cycle, and the festivals and the changes that we see in nature find expression, or their meaning is awakened in the festivals that we use to express them. So it makes sense that we'd have a death festival when the sun is coursing low across the sky in winter, when the earth is fallow and bare, when nothing is growing. There's a kind of an emotional or symbolic resonance that makes a natural amount of sense then that we'd have that. Likewise, it makes sense that we'd have a kind of spring or fertility festival on the 1st of February, when these kind of concerns and things are the landscape and the natural world is representing this kind of change. And same at May time as well. You have these kind of particularly the preoccupation with the herdsman and their cattle that they have, and the idea that they have to kind of protect their lot, specifically have to protect their butter, and more broadly speaking protect their luck. But within that, at this boundary point, the fairies are moving around. The other world is kind of this world and the other world, the barriers between them kind of disappear. It was celebrated all over Europe. In Germany, Walpurgisnacht is the night it's held, or Hexennacht, Witches' Night, which sounds more like a Halloween kind of thing, where witches meet on the highest peaks of these mountains in central Germany and have a big party with the devil, as you do.
As you do.
And Faust, in Goethe's novel, Faust goes up and has his kind of descent into hell, basically, or into his kind of final degeneracy kind of occurs on Hexennacht on that night. So you have that other world kind of connection at this time that has more in keeping with what we might imagine Halloween to be. But that's all over Europe. Bonfires were lit, and these celebrations were held. But also the summer was welcomed in with flowers often as well.
You see common kind of motifs, don't you, in the celebrations across Europe?
Totally, and that goes into to see as well, although it ties into what we were talking about last week, that the interest in folk tradition, although we see the particular expressions of a people in one place in Ireland or different parts of Ireland, you see it as part of our broader European tradition and our broader European heritage and inheritance. That this is a thing where European peoples in Estonia, in Czech, in Germany, Hungary, in all over, are having bonfires and are celebrating this night and this time, this quarter day, as the light half of the year now begins, and this is kind of how we mark that. So, although we're looking at it specifically in an Irish context, it has a much broader European kind of basis to it. It's part of that kind of wider landscape,
which is good to remember.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But apart from, I suppose, the customs and the kind of the supernatural element of it, there's quite an amount of practical concerns that were of interest at the time, and about which I'd actually know very little, being a deeply impractical fellow at the
Well, see, this is where yin and yang, Jonny.
Yes,
you do the supernatural, I'll do the boring practical bits.
Perfect. Sounds good.
So, as you said, the practical side of May Day was because it's very easy to think of festivals as serving perhaps an entertainment purpose or thinking about it in terms of those supernatural elements. But again, for our ancestors and for those kind of living in a traditional way of life in the country, the transition from one season to the next required or demanded that they observe certain responsibilities and duties in order to kind of progress through the year. And May Day in particular, and Kevin Danhart talks about this quite a bit, and there are a multitude actually of articles and chapters and books written if anyone was interested in the practical side. It's good. Rules are fun, folks. Rules are fun. Do get in touch because we could actually kind of share a reading list. But if you think about May Day, just to kind of give everyone a full picture of what May Day entails, we start thinking about kind of things as simple as tenancy agreements even. So on May Day, as the quarter day, on the 1st of May, or at the beginning of May in most places, likewise, the beginning of November, so those 2 quarter days, Beltane and Samhain, tenancy agreements would begin, and it was actually often called by many as Gale days, where land tenancies would usually begin or end, and also kind of the first half of the year's rent would become due. So people are obviously thinking about these very practical terms and how they're going to meet these kind of legal requirements. As well as that, we've got very practical duties like turf cutting season is due to begin, and anyone who spent any time on bogs would probably either love it or dread this time of year. But again, some very physical hard work to cut foot and save the winter's fuel, because again, although it's the beginning of summer, you're always looking ahead to what's going to be needed for kind of the well-being of the family and the homestead in the seasons to come. As well as that, you're going to see farmers thinking about kind of preparing meadows and kind of their tillage area for the months ahead, clearing rocks and just preparing it so that all is in place for the planting season. Then you've got docking and castration, which is a very practical thing. Just for the sake of completeness, we'll mention it, but we'll move swiftly on.
Right over that.
Yes, for Jonny getting nervous. And then 2 of the most interesting aspects that I wanted to kind of focus primarily on were the hiring fairs and the summer pasture known as the Booleying in Irish. And these were kind of, they've not passed out of memory wholly, but they're kind of 2 customs that are not practiced as readily as they would have been in the past. So even just if we think back on kind of turf cutting seasons, meadow preparation, working with the animals, it's a very kind of labour intensive period at the beginning of May, so it makes sense that it's all hands on deck, or kind of, I'm mixing my metaphors now, but boots on the ground. So it's good to have as many people available for service as possible. So it would make sense that farmers and landowners would seek more labour. So this is where we see the hiring fairs coming into place. And even in our kind of manuscripts here in the collection, you'll see I have one gentleman from Cavan, and he talks about hiring fairs happening twice a year, at the beginning of May, on May Day, and in November. But then you've got a newspaper article that we found from Donegal where they have 4 hiring fairs a year. And again, as you said, on the quarter days, 1st of February, 1st of May, 1st of August, and 1st of November. And in Wexford, we saw that they had a very popular hiring day that drew crowds from all across the county for the sake of entertainment, but also beginning these new work contracts. And the hiring fairs as well, we should say, you can get a really, how would I say, vivid account of them depending on the samples that we have in the collection here. So you'll have those who speak about them as, in terms of almost cheap slave labour, really kind of very negative connotations. And there was one gentleman from Donegal who spoke about it in terms of that the landowner owned your legs and your arms, your body and your soul. And it was just a kind of give you goosebumps a bit, because I would have grown up hearing about the traditions in Donegal of going to the Lagan area, and these really kind of, not everyone was treated well, unfortunately. So hiring fairs would have played a huge part in kind of in the May tradition at the beginning of May. But there's a lovely account from Wexford, which I'll just read so that we don't end the hiring fairs on a sad note.
Oh.
But Jonny, so it's where is it? So this would have been 1870 in Wexford, where it says, for weeks before the hiring fair at the beginning of May, preparations are made by the girls to come out in all their strength of finery. For in the Irish town on that day, Cupid holds his camp, Old loves are revived, new ones initiated, and it not infrequently happens that tenderer and more lasting engagements are made than those between master and servant. So, stop the lights.
Good to know.
Good to know. So, hiring fairs serving a very practical purpose of recruiting labourers for farmers to do all this practical work that would need to be done on the farm, but also for an opportunity of much merriment, of singing, dancing and courtship as well.
Like any of the times of the year when the whole community gets together for a grand kind of endeavour, like the harvest as well was another time when people would have to work together, or men and women are brought together in variety of capacities to work, which often they wouldn't be. They would do men's work and women's work largely, and the whole community wouldn't be brought together. But I remember chatting to somebody in the archive, a woman a number of years ago, and she grew up in a farm in Louth, I think, if I remember correctly, and there was some gentleman, he's like a farmhand, who was there for her whole life and died then. He was an elderly man as she was growing up at some stage, as far as I recall. But he had been initially kind of hired by her father at a hiring fair, and he stayed and lived with them on the farm until he died. Yeah. So there's that kind of, I suppose there's that history of the kind of the travelling labourer, travelling worker, and so on. But in some instances, maybe it wasn't entirely as bad. There must have been absolutely awful cases as well. But in some instances, maybe it wasn't. It's funny that you mentioned the kind of romantic engagements and so on. Is it Ovid, who we'll mention later on as well?
You're showing off now, Jonny.
Was
it Ovid who said?
It was. And exactly, it was 2,000 years ago in AD 17, and he was saying that brides basically who marry in May, that they'll make terrible wives or short wives, or they'll die. And you still have today the phrase,
you should marry
in May, rue the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's like 2,000 years old. You have Ovid ranting about the same thing, and it's still kind of the idea that people shouldn't marry at this time.
It still holds true.
Yeah. And I don't know where that comes from, except again you have the sense of boundary, and maybe that you shouldn't engage in a new work while everything is in such flux and such kind of metaphysical disarray, for want of a better word, that you shouldn't engage maybe in an engagement per se, or a wedding or something like that. Certainly the tendency was for everyone to be married by Shrow, and you couldn't get married at Lent, but then that was kind of after Easter it was fine again. But yeah, that tendency seems to exist still for over thousands of years, that people shouldn't marry at this time. Yeah.
And so, just to finish up on those kind of practical issues that we were talking about, I thought it useful to, for the sake of completeness, to mention this kind of the summer pasture idea and this idea of the Booley or the Boolia, which is a very old, ancient tradition in Ireland, but also northwestern Europe, really, and through into continental Europe and beyond. And the academic term, I suppose, which we were speaking about recently, is transhumance, which always sounds a little bit frightening, but it's the practice of moving livestock simply from one grazing ground to another, kind of in a seasonal cycle. And we see references to it in Ireland in 7th century texts. We've got the likes of Geoffrey Keating speaking about it in his Trí Bhíorgaíochán Weis. We see it referenced in the early Brehon laws. We see it referenced in some 15th century poetry. This whole idea, although they might not call it kind of bullying or boolia or whatever various terms are, the idea and the parameters of this tradition are obviously showing through that they always had this idea of moving livestock to kind of coincide with the seasonal transition. And it's also mentioned in the prose lives of St. Bridget as well, in that we have a story about her going to the Booley and then being so generous and so kind-hearted that when she would have the butter made in these summer pastures, she would actually share it with the community as opposed to keeping it for her farmer to whom she was hired. And then the miracle happening that each time the farmer came to kind of collect the butter, although she should have much less than she would, somehow it had magically reappeared and she had plenty, and the farmer never kind of took umbrage with this because he always got his due. So it's that idea of this movement of stock that is very old and very ancient in the Irish tradition, and that we see referenced from the 7th century onwards. So what it is, for those who don't know, it's on kind of the 1st of May or thereabouts, at the very beginning of May anyway, kind of the cattle who would have been byre fed and sheltered for the period up till May would have been let loose and taken to kind of higher summer pastures in the mountains where there was obviously at that time more lush grass as opposed to what would be on lower land, I suppose. And you'd see these little communities built up on higher mountain areas, which now to us just sounds like this very primitive idea of living when we're so used to the hustle and bustle of city life. But each May you'd see the unmarried kind of daughters and sisters and women of the communities driving the cattle to these higher pastures. And on average now, from what I've been reading and the recollections that we see in the archive, they'd be no more than 10 miles from the community that they called home, and on average would be 4 to 5 miles, just because once they were there they would have to kind of transport materials and kind of milk products back and forth, so you wouldn't want them to be too far away. And each community had a specific area that they had rights over. So you'll see certain communities speaking about, oh, we always send our girls and our cattle here or there. So there's always this parameter where they have rights over, depending on what's given to them by the landlords at the time, or so on, or what they own. And kind of, if you want to paint a picture of what these little boolies, as they were called, look like, they're little kind of communities built up really of stone huts with thatch. So some of them you would see, they're described in the archive as being made of stone with thatched roofs and kind of wooden doors, maybe one chimney. Others are made of a mixture of stone and sod work, and they might be standalone, or some might have been built into little kind of embedded into slopes for a bit of shelter. And some of them would be very simply laid out one room. Others might be a bit more sophisticated, but mostly we see a lot of kind of recollections dealing with this one room. But actually you kind of get this idea that they were very comfortable. You've got beds made out of kind of heather that kind of gives the appearance of being very warm and very solid, and that they would have had their own blankets with them. They would have a fireplace. Then they would bring all their tools in order to kind of look after the milking and the butter making processes. So you'd have all your utensils there, as well as tools for knitting and sewing that they would do in the evening. And one of the interesting things, as I mentioned earlier, was it was predominantly women, mostly all young women and young girls. There was one reference from a Niall Duffy who speaks of his mother going when she was 13, which is really young. And so we're kind of talking around that late kind of, I'd say probably mid-teens onwards, upwards, unmarried daughters and sisters of the community, and they would take their cattle, but also some of them might be responsible for looking after the cattle of other families who didn't have girls. So in these huts, or the bohuggy as they'd be called in Irish, you've got references to maybe the girls from 3 families living together. So it's this lovely communal air to it. And basically what they were responsible for was it varies. Some would stay there for 5 weeks, but then we've got recollections saying that they would have stayed for the entire summer season. And they would be responsible for herding the cattle on a daily basis, looking after them, the milking process, and then the making of the butter, the storing of the milk products. And then usually once a week, in most of the recollections, they would send someone home with them if they were going to maybe mass on Sunday, or someone would come from the community and collect them for use by the family in the community at home or for the market, because again, milk and dairy products played such a fundamental role in the economy of Ireland, and we've seen that for centuries, that it would be used either by the family or sent to market in order to generate kind of revenue for the family. And again, touching on that lighter side that always comes with such activities in our Irish life, we see the girls in the evening, a lot of them would have kind of been busy sewing and working with wool and various kind of domestic tasks. But then at the weekend you see references to the gentlemen of the community coming up to see them. Of the parish, which always sounds a bit ominous. I'm like, God, there they are isolated, and the men coming. So they would go for, and again, it's just lovely, this atmosphere of singing, dancing, and breaking, I suppose, the monotony of the girls' lives up there kind of day after day. And then at the end of the season, you see them herding the cattle back once because again, it's that whole idea of it being good for the cattle as well, so that you go and you get the freshness of the new grass, but then at the end of the season, the farm has been prepared. So once the girls are away, the farmer and all those other tasks we were looking at is preparing the farm for the next season. So it's timely that the cattle be sent back. And again, it's a 1-day transition getting to the Booley, and likewise when they get back, everything's transported back until the following year, and the bohoggy would be left. You kind of hear samples of sheep and animals on the mountain then making use of the bohoggy in the down season, but they would remain there untouched until the following year, when again the men of the community would go up maybe a week before to prepare them, to fix anything that needed fixing before the new season. And kind of to finish on that point, because again there's so much literature on that alone. We were talking about this yesterday, Jonny, and I do love a quote. So one of the descriptions about the Booley, to finish on, because again it comes across as a very idyllic time in people's lives. You've got, this is Kevin Danaher in Summer Pasture in Ireland, writing, "Everyone has agreed that life in the summer pasture was pleasant and joyful. It was good to be alive. There was the joy, the fun, the pleasure, the singing and the music. The hills were alive. In the evening, with the day's work done, the girls gathered to talk, sing, play and dance, often joined on Sunday or holiday evenings by the young men from the home places. Many looked forward with delight to the pastures, left them with regret in the autumn, and kept happy memories of them into old age." So again, it's a very positive overview of this tradition of bullying and buaile. And again, it's got various names. It's got Builchahas, Bullies, Ciminia, Comintis, Colpi, varies across all of Ireland, especially Donegal, Galway, Mayo, down that side. But as you said, as with most things in Irish folklore, it ties in with this broader tradition where we see references to it in Norway, Finland, Sweden, down to Spain, Switzerland, Germany. You've got references to Joseph in Hebron having this idea of seasonal transition of cattle. So it's a very ancient custom, but again, one of the crucial aspects of May that I think we'd probably be doing our listeners a disservice if we didn't mention it.
That's fantastic, yeah. So. You can imagine as well the, like it's described, the excitement that people would feel being away from the home, being out, especially if you're a teenager or something like that, being up in these pastures and with weather turning and stuff like that, and the kind of the freedom, the camaraderie and the freedom and so on that would be at that, it's fantastic. I didn't know that. And as well, there's who am I thinking of? George Fraser, The Golden Bough, who wrote that. He suggests this time, May time, as a particularly as the farmers or the herdsman's festival. That it's not it's there's no huge kind of agricultural or crop based work to start or occur necessarily at this time, but it's all about herds and moving of herds, and that idea is particularly old. And you see then customs that reflect that in Ireland as well, about the cattle and driving them between fires and all that sort of stuff as well. But yeah, it's fantastic, the kind of, as well, I suppose, how how aspects of material culture will bleed into these other kind of traditions or provide another space.
You see it there, don't you?
And there are maps as well, I think, that you can find of some of those areas where there's those little dwellings are still up on the sides of mountainsides. Yeah,
but you do see the remains. We've got some lovely photographs of them.
Yeah, unused nowadays, but you see that still lives on in the landscape. Yeah.
And for the sake of anyone who's interested as well, as a quick aside, there is a wonderful article about a migratory legend called The Robbers and the Captive Girl, which is very popular in kind of northwest Mayo, but also you've got over 100 of versions in Norway and in Finland and Sweden. But it's a wonderful way of seeing that this tradition existed in these various regions. So that's ML8025. For those of you who love a migratory legend, it's worth looking up.
Code, perfect, yeah.
Exactly, or inside lingo.
It's funny, is that because I didn't know now that bullying was something that centred so much around women and women's work, but it makes total sense because those who worked with cattle largely were girls and women. That was the work that was done. Yeah. And you had that division of labour among genders more clearly, where men, this is the work they do, and women likewise is the work that they do. And even the money often earned from those particular labours would be kept. So women would keep the money from milk or butter or from eggs or something like that, getting eggs, and vice versa. And that likewise in their taboos against crossing over that, that then a man shouldn't do that work, and vice versa kind of thing. You see those kind of, but in lots of the customs that you see about May Day and that revolve around milk as well, there's a huge focus on on women.
I was going to say, actually, because they come in to be scapegoats later, as we'll discuss.
Absolutely. As far as kind of the theft of milk, or the theft of kind of butter, or the theft of the house profit, basically. Which is why, again, at this time, it's a particularly, the festival as it expresses itself is one of, there's an air of the necessity of reaffirming boundary. And again, if you think even of the quarter day as a specific point, it's at this time, if you do this thing will happen. There's all this kind of idea that linked into the idea of the festival, nothing is as it usually is. So if you you can both engage in behaviours that would garner you large amounts of profit for the year ahead, or if you're not careful, if you do something at this time where you're careless, you can lose all of that sort of stuff. But overall, the idea is one of kind of pleasure and joyfulness and welcoming in the summer and so on. Yeah. Like what you read out there. Can I read it? There's a poem I have here from the 8th or 9th century, and it's one of the most beautiful. It's from Kenneth Jackson's A Celtic Miscellany, and one of the things that you find about May is welcoming the summer. And we'll look at there's the kind of May bough and all this sort of stuff. But this is it'll only take about 4 hours to read. This is... Let
me get the tea.
Yeah, exactly, boil the kettle. This is some unknown author writing in the 9th or 10th century. This is a book, an absolutely fantastic book called A Celtic Miscellany, which was kind of edited and put together by Kenneth Jackson, who was another figure that we could talk about. He interviewed Peg a lot.
He was the son she never was. Yeah, her other son.
She loved him like a son. Yeah, she wrote these beautiful letters to him, and when he first went to listen to her telling stories, as far as I can recall, I could be incorrect, he didn't speak any Irish, but he learned, he could write phonetics. So he'd listen to her speak, maybe with Robin Flower and Blúiríní, the scholar who was there from England, and he would listen to her. He would write everything down in phonetics, went away, learned Irish, came back to his phonetic notes, and translated the phonetics. So and I think he was only in his early 20s when he did that as well. So he was no slouch. But this is a book of his which I found beautiful. And this is the first poem that I read in it, which actually kind of blew me away in its kind of vividness and freshness and so on. It was the first one I read in this book, but it just talks about May and the welcoming of May. So I'll read a bit of it out. It says, Maytime, fair season, perfect is colour then. Blackbirds sing a full song if there be a scanty beam of day. The loud hardy cuckoo calls, welcome noble summer. The bitterness of bad weather subsides. The branchy wood is a prickly hedge. Summer brings low the little stream. The swift herd makes for the water. The long hair of the heather spreads out. The weak white cotton grass flourishes. The smooth sea flows. Season when the ocean falls asleep. Flowers cover the world. Man thrives. The maiden flourishes in her fine strong prime. Every wood is fair from crest to ground. Fair each great goodly field. Delightful is the season's splendour. Rough winter has gone. Bright as every fertile wood, a joyful peace is summer. A timid, persistent, frail creature sings at the top of his voice. The lark chants a clear tale, excellent Maytime of the quiet colours. I love it.
It's beautiful.
Fantastic. It's amazing. I absolutely love that poem here, the 9th century. But it's some monk in the 9th century writing this kind of in praise of May. But the descriptions of the natural world and the changes in the natural world as well, are beautiful. And that kind of a mad ardour upon you to race horses as well. But you see, I suppose, a time of welcoming in and of kind of bidding farewell to the harsh rigours of winter, basically, which are kind of disappearing at this time.
But it's nice what you say about that flowers cover the world.
Yeah.
Because that kind of ties in very nicely with our next, I suppose, topic on the agenda of kind of verdure customs and this reaffirming of boundaries almost as well with flowers and May bushes and May boughs and whatnot.
The May bough and the May bush is something you see kind of the world over, or at least all over Europe, insofar as this kind of custom was celebrated. And typically May was welcomed by gathering flowers, gathering primroses, and gathering the May bough. In some instances, a tree would be cut down, which is even May pole. But on May morning or May Eve, often primroses were gathered. They were scattered on windowsills. They were scattered at the front of the door. They were hung over the door in the house. And in some cases, a kind of an altar was set up, and that altar often would be dedicated to Our Lady, the Blessed Lady, and that would be kind of set up in the house at times as well. But all over Europe, you have this idea of welcoming the summer and welcoming the flowers, or kind of garlands of flowers, and children might go out gathering posies of flowers, scattering them around, or leaving them in neighbours' gardens, or, like I said, putting them outside the front of the house. And another thing that you find often is the May bush. which would be a kind of maybe a piece of hawthorn decorated with ribbons, decorated with eggshells. Often the painted eggshells left over from Easter were hung on it. Sometimes candles were hung up on it. And you'll still see those if you travel around the country, in the Midlands and parts of the country around. You'll still see that sort of stuff outside houses. I remember seeing photographs from Sligo town, so kind of urban area, and there was firs and kind of hawthorn hanging from the doors and from windows and so on. So anyone who's listening as well, go gather on May Eve, gather bits of primroses, bits of flowers, scatter them around.
And we should actually say, because you just reminded me that we didn't specify that this period of sunset on May Eve until noon on May Day, this is the period.
This is the feast. This is the period of yes. Actually, we should have. Yeah, this is the period where the strangeness commences, and
lock the doors, stay inside.
Essentially, yeah, and it's from sundown of the eve before to roughly kind of noon, and you see the same thing then at Halloween, where the 1st of November is the day itself, but the festivities start at sundown the night before. Yeah. And Dáithí O'Hogan in the lore of Ireland, I remember in lectures of his, where he would say that he held that the conception for our ancestors, I suppose, of day and night was essentially in the reverse, that night came first and then day. And that likewise the dark half of the year, the night time of the year, the portion of the year that you'd associate symbolically maybe or spiritually with death in a sense, came first. And that afterwards then the daytime came. So that it made sense to begin these celebrations at dusk or at sundown. And further, he, I suppose, would point to that the sound, the old, as we celebrate as Halloween, is the old New Year festival that we have. And so the division of the year into these two halves, dark and light, was very much hinged on these kind of sound and belting of festivals. You had the old phrase, "O sound go belting, so belting go sound," to divide the year. So it kind of splits it in half in this way. And I suppose I didn't mention when I was talking about quarter days as well, if you split the wheel of the year into these 4 quarters, and each of these quarter days and the festivities that we celebrate, they in essence, they describe the season and the feast that we hold for the season. Those, in Irish tradition, they fall exactly halfway between the solstices and equinoxes. Yeah. So the solstice, when the sun is either at its highest course in the sky in the summer or the lowest course in the sky for the longest day and shortest day. And then the equinox, when the Earth's equator passes through the centre of the sun, so that the day and night are roughly kind of similar. We have festivals that celebrate those. So, for example, Christmas or Yule is held at the solstice in December, the shortest day. Easter as well is at this time, solstices and equinoxes and so on.
True.
Michaelmas, the feast of St. Michael the Archangel in September. These seem to be kind of connected to those equinoxes and solstices. But our quarter days fall exactly halfway between them. If anyone is listening to, if you Google the wheel of the year, you'll see, because it's hard to describe it. But
it's a nice representation when you see it.
Like the kind of points of the compass and how the year is divided in accordance with the passage of the sun and the moon and so on and so forth. But yeah, typically say in welcoming the summer, the May bush and flowers and so on were brought about, and often young girls as well would get up at this time before dawn. Again, this is reference to boundary, and they'd wash their faces with the May dew as an aid to beauty. Sometimes, as it was understood. This is a recording that I play that I've taken from the archive now, and this is from Teresa Mooney, from Staplestown in County Kildare, and this was recorded in 2014.
When she was 90.
When she was 90, God bless her, yeah. Recorded by Christopher McCortick, our director here, and Carol Barron, who was there doing a kind of study on some of the school's collection material, as far as I remember. But she's describing the collection of kind of flowers for the May bush and how it was unlucky if it wasn't done. So this is Teresa Mooney.
And the May Day, Teasy, could I ask you?
Oh, yeah.
You used to put up a bush?
A May bush, that's right.
Tell us about that.
It should be more rags on it than nothing else. Maybe some old piece of a cloth torn up, and there'd be eggshells, and there'd be cowslips and primroses. And all them, you'd gather all them, put them up. And he didn't, it was unlucky he didn't put up. And if you didn't go out and wash the back of your neck on May morning, you're going to be real yellow for the rest of the year. And wash your forehead right across with them. So I'd like to see them doing it now. Put them out in the wet grass, washing your face in it.
So you used to wash your face with the dew off the grass?
The dew off the grass, yeah. You go out
and that was for luck?
You'd be real yellow for the year
if you didn't. Yeah.
That was it. That's what they tell you anyway at that time.
Well, if Teasy lived till 90, I'm going out in May morning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There was the riddle. I washed my face in water that neither poured nor run, and dried it in a towel that was neither woven nor spun.
True, which is lovely, isn't it?
Yeah, I washed my face in the morning dew and dried it and let it dry in the sun or whatever. But that was common, but it points again to the sense of boundary. The idea is that, so she was saying you'd be very yellow, you'd be very kind of yellow looking if you don't do this.
Yeah.
So, or that it'll kind of add to someone's beauty if they do, or it's lucky for you to do it. The sense of boundary is reinforced by the fact that, say, you can't go out on the dawn of the 2nd of May and do this. Nothing will happen. Or on Tuesday in February or something like that. It doesn't matter. It has to be at this particular time, before this time, and so on and so forth. There's that sense of boundary to it, basically. Again, but like I said, from sunset of the evening before to roughly noon on the day itself. This is the period when everything is in a state of flux. In the last episode, we were talking about the functions of folk tradition, that it's very much a living thing. And that in many ways, many of these kind of customs and expressions of belief would, in modern society at least, they'd be kind of ridiculed, actually, or be regarded as kind of backwards or
naive.
Exactly, yeah. But it has to be borne in mind that there's another type of reasoning being applied, basically, in when you look at traditional beliefs and folk custom. There's a kind of an emotional reasoning that looks at, takes in, symbolism, essence, likenesses, coincidences, differences, and these sorts of ideas, and it proceeds on that basis. So it imagines that causes and effects can be brought about between objects maybe that are slightly similar. Or, for example, if I want to do harm to some arch nemesis that I have or something like that, if I have a piece of their garment or a piece of their hair or something like that, if I do some damage to that, then symbolically that damage will be transferred to that individual. There's a kind of, but it's a symbolic or emotional way of reasoning your way through kind of certain situations. But they all relate to very fundamental kind of needs and expressions, basically. They promote human welfare and human well-being at a very fundamental level, and they try to bring it about good luck and banish misfortune. So that they have very specific root concerns. They're not kind of random or haphazard or just kind of floating around, basically. But again, you see that reference to boundary specifically as far as the May Day and the May bush and customs surrounding it. There's another instance here which I'll go through in the tape that I've taken from the archive, and this is Mrs. Mary Woods, who is actually the mother of Vincent Woods, the RTE, who's working on RTE Radio. And this was recorded by Vincent Woods in 1982 from his mother, Mary, who's from Dunkieran in County Leitrim, and she was born in 1920. And she's describing how an Antrim woman used to be very kind of upset with them that when she came to Leitrim, she realised that they didn't leave these flowers out in the windowsills and so on, and she instructed that they're to do so. This is another piece just about welcoming the summer, basically.
I do remember a woman who came up from Antrim, Mrs. Mara, and she was appalled that the people up here didn't put mayflowers on the door, around the windows. And she said it was always done up in Antrim on May Eve. So for a while it was done. Just gather the primroses and put them on the windows and put them on the doorstep.
So I'll go out and get primroses.
It's true.
Yeah, go out and pick them up and send them around. But yeah, flowers. The summer was welcomed in with flowers, largely with these garlands of flowers, or the May bush, which was kept outside the house, and like I said, was decorated. And that was often viewed as being unlucky to take it into the house, that it should be kept outside, that you shouldn't. I mean, hawthorn itself was often viewed as a thing that you shouldn't bring inside. It was often associated with the fairies, who we'll look at in later episodes as well, shouldn't be regarded as the kind of Victorian literary kind of Tinkerbell kind of creations, but as kind of nature spirits, basically, in a sense. That can be either malevolent or helpful. Yeah. They can help or hinder, but they're generally kind of dangerous. And they are often associated with hawthorn, and so hawthorn has these kind of ominous associations with it, that it shouldn't be necessarily brought into the house. But the May bush would decorate kind of the area, and children would often kind of create this a beautiful little bush outside the house that'd be decorated, like I said, in ribbons and eggs and so on and so forth. And that was sometimes dedicated, as I was mentioned, to Our Lady. And this was a time, I suppose, where the May altar sometimes was made as well, and that was decorated to her. There's a recording that I'd like to play now, which was recorded in 1980 from Mrs. Bridget Dunn on Morehampton Road in Dublin, and she was 91. And this piece is recorded, and she's describing the May bush and how it was unlucky to bring into the house, and likewise the creation of the May altar.
And sorry, Granny, would you mind telling me about the May bush again? Tell me about the May bush.
Well, it's supposed to be, the May bush was dedicated to Our Blessed Lady. Mm-hmm. And nobody was supposed to touch that May bush the ones that was growing outside. But when you want to bring flowers to the ladies' altar, you brought the wild flowers of the roads, the cowslips, the primroses, and other things that were growing. But we never touched the maybush. We were told not to. We never touched it. No, we didn't do it.
And was it unlucky to bring the maybush into somebody's
So they
house?
say, so they say. But we never saw anything like that happening to any of us about the maybush. It was only, I always thought afterwards, it just said that way we wouldn't sift the trees of it. Oh, I don't know.
And used to prepare an altar in school?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And an altar at home. Had 2 cloths, a blue cloth, white cloth, and the statue of Blessed Lady. Oh, yes. And then we used to light the candles on our altar. I used to clean the candlesticks and put the candles into it and make it clean. And it used to be lovely. And they say to me, oh, you're a great girl, you have them shining. Yeah.
It's nice, isn't it?
Isn't it lovely?
Yeah.
But isn't it great? She's 91 when she's giving this.
She's
and it
91
just
in
shows
1980.
you the importance of actually getting these voices on
absolutely.
tape.
Yeah,
doesn't it?
yeah, and it gives it gives such a kind of resonant quality to the whole thing. It centres it in the whole way where you could see that kind of as text, say. But you have a different kind of sense of it altogether when you hear the voice, when you hear her speaking. Yeah. But it's beautiful, and again, she's describing, well, what did you use to make the maybush? Well, the flowers of the road, cowslips, primroses, the kind of flowers that were growing around, and that's.
It's working with nature in your environment.
It's exactly
isn't it?
that. It's exactly that. It's part and parcel of folk tradition. It's so rooted in the natural environment. It's a product of it. If it's even from the seasons, the courses of the sun, of the moon, how the physical landscape is changing, what are the flowers that are around now, what are the changes that are occurring, and what do you have in your local environment? And so this ties into the variability of folk traditions while maintaining a stable kind of theme. So depending on the flowers that grow in other parts of Europe, then different flowers will be used. But it's always what do you have in your own environment, and what can we take in that regard to reflect these celebrations basically.
And so now again, as we said at the beginning, there's so much to cover here, and we can't possibly do justice to it in a podcast. But again, that idea of mayflowers, the maybush, the maybough, the may bonfire, mayballs as well, maypoles. There's a huge literature for folks that are interested in reading about it, and we'd certainly encourage it. But just to kind of finish on that point, it wasn't always necessarily a light-hearted affair sometimes, because you do see references to extreme violence sometimes depending on the tradition. So you've got the maybush and the mayballs, this idea between communities. We have references from Dublin where the likes of the Liberty Boys and the Ormond Boys would really get into fisticuffs about stealing bonfires from one another, the materials. Or in Kilkenny, you've got accounts in the newspapers of men being killed as they try and steal the mayballs from one another, from one community to the other. And it comes to the stage, as with a lot of things in folk tradition in Ireland, where the authorities step in and you see the kind of passing of certain laws. So in the maybush tradition, a lot of people associate the demise with the passing of these laws, where they're looking at laws against nuisance and laws, kind of environmental or kind of almost early environmental laws about the protection of land and property, so that people wouldn't be going in and cutting down trees and growth and greenery. And so you do see this, I suppose, that kind of juxtaposition of the light-hearted and the festive and the protective elements of these customs, but also this kind of the darker, more malevolent side, that it's always interesting just for the sake of being thorough to mention.
Oh, I think it's fantastic. All human life is there, from the grotesque and the
Good, bad,
surreal to the beautiful. That's it, yeah, and that's the kind of the function of it ultimately as well. You have the sense of competition between the Liberty Boys and the Ormond Boys that you describe. I think Oscar Wilde's father is going around town at that stage, and he mentions some prize bush or hedge is cut from some gentleman's lawn and stolen away. And then you have, physical kind of conflicts and disputes, but you also see something interesting that you see time and again, which is the often the harshness, say, or the looking down upon by the state and kind of the authorities and officials of the state or of officialdom on aspects of folk tradition. You see that in more contemporary period with even Halloween bonfires and the kind of nuisances apparently that are caused by these kind of things. The Smithfield Horse Fair, you've seen similar kind of instances where this can't be seen to kind of carry on anymore. We have to undo this and so on and so forth. But undoing essentially, I suppose, expressions that are not neat and tidy, but they express the kind of, I would say, the fullness really of human experience in nature in many ways. That isn't always very twee and kind of neatly packaged and so on. You know, you see these things time and again of magistrates giving out about these horrible practices and the savour of paganism that kind of lurks in them and so on that need to be kind of shut down. But that dark element serves a function, it serves a purpose. And it's worth noting as well, at festival observances in certain times of the year, you have built into them often these kind of transgressive elements. So as opposed to, you know, people might think that our traditional societies are so kind of stuffy and conservative and so on, but they have at their core, at their foundation, built into them, like I said, these transgressive modes that find particular expression at festival dates. So you have, for example, on St. Stephen's Day, the day after Christmas, the Wren boys who go around dressed as in women's clothes, often wearing rags and causing noise and bursting into houses with a dead wren on a bush, basically asking for money to bury the wren. Entreating the occupants to give them a few pence, having a party in the area later on, or else cursing them if they don't give them money. You see similar things at Halloween, obviously, vestiges now, although it's largely children who go around from house to house, or Brits Day, the biddy boys who go around. When weddings occurred, the uninvited male guests or uninvited males in the area would arrive as straw boys wearing anonymous kind of masks. So you have this sense where norms are inverted, are reversed. Men are wearing women's clothing, they're going around in anonymous masks, they're making loud noises, they're bursting into your house. But ultimately, it's as though the community is kind of breaking the ties that bind briefly in a certain framework in order to reassert them and kind of tie them tighter together. But it's built in at a very kind of fundamental level. But it often brings in aspects of the grotesque, aspects of the terrifying and so on. But it kind of, for me, that's one of the some of the resonance and power of these things, that they don't shirk away from the darker element to human existence or life. They kind of try to incorporate it, you know, as part of this total cycle, basically. But you see that as well in lots of the other customs that we can look at now as well. The sense of, that we mentioned, boundary and kind of paranoia, and where at May the community attempts to kind of reassert itself at its at a fundamental unit, which is the family unit in this sense, as opposed to in modernity is much more kind of maybe individualistic tendency. But as far as this time, the community asserts itself at May by an absolute kind of reverting to what are the limits of the family unit. So the home needs to be protected. It needs to be protected from outside interference, from supernatural interference, or from malevolent neighbours. And the idea as well, because cattle and so on are so important at this time, and the work of the herdsman is carrying on, and the bullying is occurring, that milk and milk production is a central part of this. And one of the products, obviously, that are made from milk and that were so central in the Irish diet and Irish life was butter. And every family, or most families around the country, would have their own churn in the house, where milk would be churned by women usually, and the butter would come on the top. But the idea was that if somebody stole by some supernatural charm the profit from your house, that you could churn all the time, but no butter would come. And so this is one of the reasons that, say, the fire wouldn't be lit on May morning until a certain hour, because somebody could see the smoke coming from your house, and they'd say, all to me, or some such similar kind of practice.
Iman Jatishan or Muhaj Banyasa.
Iman Jatishan or Muhaj Banyasa,
while walking backwards into the house.
The butter of that smoke
on my milk.
And that this would be stolen and kind of given to me, so that when I go home and I churn, I'll get twice as much butter and you'll get none. This is the kind of the sense. And again, women were the ones who would often thought to be doing this. They kind of travel onto someone else's land at this time, maybe skim a well or bail the water from a well in the direction of their land, or skim across or walk across the field and take the May dew off the grass with a rope or a spancel with a cow's tail, kind of hair at the end of it. So you have that symbolic kind of component to it, where this is an emotional and symbolic approach to being and so on, but you're attempting to attack people basically, but through these supernatural charms. Here's a recording Again, this is Mrs. Mary Wood, so Vincent Woods' mother, being recorded in 1982, and she's talking about the not lighting of the fire basically on May morning, and the kind of the sense of paranoia, I suppose, that abounded at the time.
How was May regarded when you were a child?
May was regarded, of course, as the first of summer. Now the weather mightn't be summery. The children usually took off their boots and stockings on May Day. Might have to put them on again. But the fire was most important. So they never liked to put on a smoke, as they said. That is to light the fire early on May morning. And that was in case that anybody was interested in getting their butter. Said that there'd be anybody in the guise of a hare or even in human form out on the hills overlooking the houses could say, well, the butter of all these smokes to me for the year. And now my own mother, God rest her, would not give a drop of milk to anybody on May Day. And that is quite true. I've refuse neighbours and strangers and, travelling people. And she told them the reason. She said that in years before that, her father, their people lost all their butter. They could be churning away no butter. It was very important that they had butter at that time. And the priest came to the house and he told him, they got back the butter anyhow through his prayers and whatever else they did. But he said never to give out any milk on May Day and never to lend the churning utensil to anybody at all during the year, and especially to anybody that lived across the stream from them.
It ties in with that idea of no lending, no borrowing, no spending.
Totally, yeah.
It's neighbourliness goes out the window on May 1st, doesn't it?
So locked down.
And you're orientated.
Yeah. And you mean don't light your fire, don't do anything, don't let anything escape from the house that is of vital and essential nature or to the house's kind of spiritual well-being, for want of a better word. And the idea again of the fire as such a central kind of part of the house, even often for example, an individual who is lying ill in a house, who is sick, if the fire suddenly was to become extinguished, that would betoken death maybe for the person. So the fire should always be tended while someone's ill. That has, I would feel, more to do with the symbolic representation of what the fire is in the home, more so than, keep the person warm. It's obviously important, but there's the idea that if something sudden is seen to interrupt into the normal kind of running or day-to-day running of the house, even in that material sense, that it has an impact on them, or it betokens or prophesies a more spiritual kind of ailment or disaster, basically. So, everything must be contained. Don't let anything out of the house. If somebody comes into the house and wants a light for a smoke or a pipe or something like that, they can't have it. If they want milk, they can't have it. And if the smoke escapes from your house before noon, somebody can steal your look away and so on.
And people knew that, which is something to note. So people knew not to ask as well. So it wasn't just that you were deciding not to give. People knew not to ask because they wouldn't get it.
Yeah. And then by the same token, someone who is asking surely is up to some sort of malevolence. Exactly. Someone who is on your land surely is up to some sort of malevolence.
But weren't you saying about the gentleman who had a gun and was not afraid to use it?
Oh, well, that was another one, yeah. That was a farmer who was in Cork. We have many questionnaires in the archive here on May Day. And this was a farmer in Cork in the 1940s, 1948, I think. I could be totally wrong there. And he said that if he saw a woman on his land on May Day, he'd shoot her. And that she should know, and she would know. So it would be an instant that she's just up to no good. She's practicing magic or witchcraft or some sort of malevolence. And this was in the 1940s. Now, you have, I suppose, that as an account. And then similarly, if I can read a quote out, if I can find it briefly, which I've taken from William Camden, who wrote a fantastic book, Britannia, which has one of these, it's from 1566, 1586, I can't recall exactly, but one of these fantastic titles. It's called Britannia, or a chorographical description of the most flourishing kingdoms, England, Scotland and Ireland, and the islands adjoining, out of the depth of antiquity, beautified with maps of the several shires of England, written first in Latin by William Camden, translated newly into English by Philemon Holland, Doctor in Physic, finally revised, amended and enlarged with sundry additions by the said author. It rolls off the tongue.
Wouldn't you hate to be in that marketing department?
Yes, exactly, yeah.
God.
But in Camden's Britannia, so this is from the mid-16th century, he talks about May Day, and specifically there's a section at the end, and you can look at this online. He talks about the manners of the Irishry, and he describes kind of customs and folk traditions that abound at the time. And he says, they take her for a wicked woman and a witch, whatever she be, that cometh to fetch fire from them on May Day. Neither will they give any fire then, but unto a sick body, and that with a curse. For because they think the same woman will the next summer steal away all their butter. If they find a hare amongst their herds of cattle on the said May Day, they kill her, for they suppose she is some old trot that would filch away their butter. They are of the opinion that their butter, if it be stolen, will soon after be restored again, in case they take away some of the thatch that hangeth over the door of the house, and cast it into the fire. And upon these calends, or the 1st day of May, they fully believe that to set a green bough of a tree before their houses will cause them to have great abundance of milk all summer long. So you have this air of kind of uncertainty, paranoia, and the neighbourliness goes out the window, and you reassert your boundaries with reference to the kind of indivisible unit, which is the family unit, the home as a kind of centre needs to contain itself, basically. There's an instance here again that refers to women stealing butter and being able to kind of at times so that they change into hares and they'd shapeshift as William Camden describes, and that they would go and they'd suckle all the cattle and steal the milk away, and that then they'd change back into a shape of a woman, but they'd have all of your profit. So this is an individual, Pat Kenny, who's from Glencullen, Kiltiernan in County Dublin. He was 88 when this was recorded in 1980.
I've often had it said years gone by here in this place around, for certain women, if they come in, if you were churning milk, they'd take the butter off your churn, and though they wouldn't be near it.
How used to do that, you know?
That's the thing, you see. That was some charm, you see.
Yeah.
There was certain women could do that, take your butter away.
Used to do that in May Day in particular, was it?
It was sometime in May that it happened.
Yeah.
But in fact, I think they had the power, matter if they did come in, if you were churning, they could do it.
Was there any way you could stop them, or you could get your butter back?
Oh, no way. They'd be gone, you'd have no butter in your churn.
Yeah.
Well, they say probably they didn't take the butter, but they must have wind or one over it. That no butter come on the milk. I think that
They were supposed to take it, but that was another mystery. How did they do it? But the butter would be gone anyway.
He starts ripping up a paper to smoke his pipe there as he carries
that
on.
what that is?
Yeah. But that was the common idea often that as well, that women would change into hares. There's a popular legend about the farmer is going to his herd and they're not giving any milk. He goes to the priest, he goes to other people in the town, in the village around, and nobody can give him a satisfactory answer to his query until he goes to a woman living at the edge of the town, a traveller woman or such, and he'll ask her what he should do, and she suggests go get a black greyhound and look at your herd at dawn. It's even a reference to boundary again. At a specific time, go and watch your herd, which he does. He goes to the herd, and as he watches, he sees a hare suckling the cattle from cow to cow, and he lets fly the black greyhound after this hare. It takes chase across the field, and as the hare is jumping through a gap in the hedge, the greyhound manages to just take a bite out of its thigh or such. But it runs off into a little cottage, so the farmer and the greyhound continue their chase until they get into the house, and when they get in, they just see an old woman sitting by the fire, and she's spinning at a wheel or some such. And they ask her, did you see a hare come in here though? And she denies it. No, I didn't see anything of the sort. And they're about to leave until they notice that she has the same injury that the hare had. So she's shape-shifted and kind of come back into the house.
And taking their profit with her.
And taking the profit with her. So you have the idea that women who were working with milk were more likely to be the ones who would kind of bring malevolence about. But often in that story as well, then, you have the individual who is the source of the danger, say, is the old woman living on her own at the edge of the town, this kind of liminal figure in herself.
And not necessarily the old woman either, because we see references to kind of old women, widows, unmarried women, and Protestant women, anything that's other.
Essentially what you have, I suppose, is the danger in the figure who maybe doesn't fully conform to the norms of the kind of society, basically. However, you also often have then the only individual who can resolve this particular problem is the same kind of woman. Okay. So you have the woman who the only one who can give the example of, well, how is this to be resolved correctly, is the woman living on her own at the edge of the town who's able to say, get a black greyhound and go at this time and it'll be revealed to you. So you have these individuals are both kind of the source of danger and confusion, but also a source of knowledge. And the two things are kind of wrapped up together, that there's the danger in the unknown, but it also provides you with knowledge.
Can't live with us, can't live without us.
That's basically the deal, yeah. But it's these kind of peripheral...
Life lesson number 2.
Peripheral kind of liminal figures who provide a certain kind of insight, but the society and its structures would say that not all women should be like this. This isn't the way that kind of our society should be modelled, say, but within that, there is this form of kind of danger, but also of knowledge. You know, these things are kind of contained, which is quite an insightful approach, I think, to the unknown, basically. You know, but yeah, this is the idea commonly that was the kind of the malevolence at this time was attached to women largely.
And to round the circle, so to speak, there were charms and protections available for people who had their butter stolen, wasn't there?
There were.
And that we talk about those common motifs of the warm iron, or putting, protecting the churn with the warm iron, or placing spancels in wells or holy water along the thresholds, not only of the house but also of the homestead and then the field. So you see it circling out and building up each threshold, family, home, and the land
needs to be protected. Salt to be put in your well, or as you described, and even Camden mentions kind of the thatch being taken or thrown in the fire. Sometimes the individual who had stolen your profit could be found by placing the metal from a plough or the chains or pieces of metal in the fire, and as this heat would be transferred to the chains, it would then be transferred, or to the piece of the plough that was put in, it would be transferred to the individual who stole your butter, and they'd come to your door in pain and distress, allowing pleas kind of to relieve them of this. At which point you'd throw some butter maybe into the fire, and it would they'd be relieved of their pain, and you'd receive your luck again. So this is that kind of emotional reasoning and sympathetic magic that kind of goes into these types of kind of conceptions and customs. Basically, there's a very brief piece here I have again from Mrs. Mary Woods, and she's talking about butter that was stolen and a spancel that was used. A spancel is a rope used to tie cattle's legs, basically. So this is, again, you're taking an aspect of material culture, but you're using it in this kind of inverse way or another way that has a more spiritual or magical element to it. So this is a description of butter being stolen but then being gotten back.
The belief that the butter could be taken. How was it believed that could be done?
By just being out on May morning, but there may have been something else. You know, they may have had a thread or a spancel. Now, there was one case where a man actually found the woman milking his cow, and she had a straw spancel on the cow, but she had to run away anyhow and leave the spancel behind. And he took it up and brought it in, threw it up as we used to at the loft. It was over the kitchen. Thought no more about it, and when he churned again, the churn was full of butter.
So it was believed that the spancel had
Yes, he got so alarmed anyhow, but every time he churned it was the same thing. He went to the priest and told him the story. He said, well, keep the spancel until you believe that you have regained all the butter you lost, and then burn it. And he burned it when he realised that he had all the butter got back.
So this is the kind of the danger of the time, basically.
It's looking at May Day is actually a lovely way to start the series proper, really, isn't it? Because it's just so rich and full in terms of the oral literature, material culture, the customs.
Calendar custom is always a good way to bring these things out, but it's a vast area of folk custom and belief that is. We can barely begin to scratch the surface of it here today, essentially.
We'd be here until next May Day, wouldn't we really?
Yeah, exactly.
And beyond.
Yeah.
And one thing we should say, just so for those who are interested further, there's a vast trove of material, as Jonny was saying, here in the archive, between the manuscript collection, the audio collection, and also we have the questionnaires, as Jonny mentioned, and even yesterday I just briefly went through those that could potentially tie in with a theme like this. We have questionnaires on milk, on Maytime itself, on dairies, on quarter days, on butter, on fairs and hiring fairs. So a huge variety of ways into this topic where it might appear. So it might not necessarily just be under calendar custom. There's a numerous array of lines into it, isn't there? That if people were interested, we'd recommend you get in touch or visit, really, because there's plenty to keep you going.
Likewise on the website on duchas.ie, a lot of this has been digitised, and you can type in May Day or Maytime, and you'll find an enormous amount of references come up from 1937 from the schools collection. So if you can't make it into us, you can look at that material online at duchas.ie, duchas.ie, or else come and visit.
You're always welcome. So we're going to draw to a close there because we realise that it's a huge beast of a subject, and kind of it's time to go and have your tea now, and we'll have ours, and we'll see you for the next episode, which will revert to a monthly podcast schedule now. These first two, we kind of wanted them to come quite closely together, just that we'd catch your attention, but we'll now kind of stick to our kind of first week of each month or so.
Yes, that would be the ideal. Yeah. And given, say, even the connection with women at this time of May, and some of the narratives associating it either with kind of the, you know, wise woman or the hags at the edge of the town, or also the altars to Our Lady and so on that were put up, we wanted to finish up with something from the archive, which is we'll do in each of these as well. And this is that we're going to play now, Shannon song, sung by Shosel Bohaney, fantastic singer, from Connemara's Queen in a Dríomhara, which is a kind of a song around kind of Our Lady's description, or how her experiencing Christ's passion, basically, and he's being crucified essentially, and she's it's this kind of lament for what's being done to him, basically. But it's a beautiful song. So we'll finish on this particular note, and see you next time,
where I'll be quoting some Virgil,
no doubt.